Welcome to 3P&R. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me tonight is going to be Darleen Christopher, psychic medium. Darleen, how you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me on your show. I'm doing great.
I'm glad to have you back. It's been a while since we'd spoken last, and the primary focus for me and for a lot of people listening anyway is kind of like, it's the human question. Like, we're here, why are we here? And then what's after this, right?
Right.
So in your experience, especially with connections to the other side, what do you, in your belief system, what do you think what's post here?
What's post here? That's an interesting question. Well, we're here to evolve. We're here to grow. We're here to love. We are here to expand our judgments and go through them as we judge. I believe we absolutely keep coming back. And I don't think that Jesus was the only one that got to reincarnate. And I do see charts all the time. I'm an astrologer as well as an intuitive advisor, but I see charts all the time where they just mind blows me every time, where everything is sort of in a way scheduled. And I think we have some choice and free will, of course, but it's interesting to me to see how things are lined up. And even in the moment that you pass and how you pass, and all that is in the chart. Even in this moment when we're talking, I threw a chart to see what was going on. And here you wanted to talk about the afterlife. Well, interestingly enough, so Saturn is rising right now. And what is Saturn? It's the planet of the death in a way. It's restrictions and endings and anything that's hard and limiting, but also where we get rewarded. And it's where we do the work. It's also called the devil in the chart. And I don't believe in hell, but I do understand where our hardness and where it might be hard in our lives with what was indicated in our astromap of what we have to do the work to resolve and what's happening right now in the sky. So Aquarius is rising as we speak. I'm on the Pacific time frame anyway, in Seattle. And Aquarius is about the unusual. And the sun, the light, the consciousness, also as well as the ego, what we project, is conjoined Venus, which is beautiful. It's all about love, but it's in Scorpio. And it's interesting because it's exact to the degree to the south node, and conjoined Mercury as well, all in the house of the eighth. Now, the south node is like the past and our past lives. So it's interesting that we're talking about this right now on topic. And it's all in the house of the death house, which is the house of transformation, rebirth, where we have to do the hard work, what we have to grow, what we have to do to change ourselves, what we grow through other people with our intimate partners, as well as other people and other people's resources, as well as insurance and taxes. So it's interesting that in this moment, this is what's up. And right. Mars is in the house of the fourth, which is the house of endings of the matter. The eighth house is also an ending of life. So I think it's interesting that you called and you asked to do it at this time. And I thought, what time is good to do this? And it's ironic that you just happened to pick 3:00 your time, my time anyway. And all that's showing up in the chart. And in respect to the sun, Venus, and Mercury, and as well as the South Node, which rules past lives, all in Scorpio. And Scorpio is all about death and rebirth and regeneration and the mysteries and the occult. And it's in the eighth house, which is dealing with all of this. So I think it's very timely and pro to talk about this in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, you see how it works out, because it was like a couple of weeks ago, I was getting hit with questions from people I know. And they're like, well, what have you discovered about the afterlife? I'm like, I don't know yet. For me, the jury's still out. And then I thought of you. So I was like, I'm going to ask Darleen. And so you see how it kind of worked out, right? On both halves.
Yeah, I do believe in the afterlife. And I don't know if you remember, I think we might have discussed this in our first interview, where I'm so sure about the afterlife because my daughter, who was just 3, said, Mommy, when I was your mommy and you were my little girl, and kept insisting I was her daughter. And, who told her that? She watches Leapfrog Entertainment kind of thing. Right. We never went to church and talked about any kind of thing like that. Although, I wanted to wait for her to be a little older to go to church and just decide for herself that that's what she wanted to do. And that when I was 8, I said to my mother, who's going to be the mother in this life, me or you? I mean, that just flew out of my mouth. And I, where does that come from? I don't know. Our souls, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, what I've come to learn anyway, our soul and our consciousness are the same thing. It's just raw energy. And I firmly believe now, because before this podcast, before even looking into any of this, I would say, well, when it's over, it's over. Your computer turns off and that's that. But there's been so many cases I've read where there's kids and they're recalling previous lives. On a high note, this kid from the 80s with his great detail to him being a pilot in World War II. I mean, with detail, not even a famous pilot, just some random pilot, but with great detail. And this is before the internet. This kid didn't have the resources to look that up and get these kind of details, right? And so,
are you talking about? Because I did this chart class actually with Maurice Fernandez, the death chart of James Langston and James Hughes. Are you talking about that?
Yeah,
that guy?
Yeah, it's mind blowing.
I have those charts, interestingly enough. And you know what? It is so mind blowing because it's interesting that you brought that up because I thought about talking about that.
Yeah,
this exact issue on this channel.
If nothing more, that story grabbed me because again, this is predating the ability to utilize the internet for instant information and this is a kid. This is far from his interest. I assure you this much. It just compelled him. So, I mean, in a sense, what I'm starting to think is our energy. So our body is the avatar and our energy goes back to the source and it either gets reincarnated or, recycled, right? You're needed here to do great things or your energy goes elsewhere. Well, this kid's energy came back and like any other data, like if you wipe the information from your computer, all the energy from your computer, somewhere in there, the data is still residual. So I think this kid had residual information and it just blew me away the way he was talking about it.
And I didn't hear what he was saying exactly. I just heard that he had phenomenal information about fighter planes, going to a museum, an air museum, and new uncanny information. I thought, wow. But I saw those charts and gosh, I'm actually wanting to dig for them right now. But because I have those charts actually, interestingly enough. But what I recall that was so amazing was what Maurice looked at was because this guy knew that he kept having these nightmares about dying in the water, right? Right. And these nightmares actually ended, and his parents evidently, that made national news, by the way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I heard it long ago. And then recently started kind of looking into it. Cause, we all do this. Every human on earth, the reason we have religion, the reason we ponder about who's in control is because we question our mortality. It's really what it comes to.
Well, what was interesting about those two charts because I took a full class on that, and it was so interesting to me to watch that the death chart, which they discovered exactly what day the previous James died, and the new guy when they were born, they had what was interesting an exact to the degree North Node, like you didn't get your last lesson in this last life. So here you are again, which only comes every 18.9 years, which is amazing. And he had the exact opposite of the moon to the degree. So I thought that is incredible because the moon represents our mother relationship, our emotions, our needs, our stability. But for him to have the moons in opposition made me wonder, well, gosh, in another life, maybe he has a different mother. He's playing out how he was nurtured in this life to his, who knows what he's going to do with his kid. But I think it's interesting, or if he has kids, I don't know.
Oh, he's got to be in his 40s now, right? That was a long time ago. And
yeah.
When you listen to the details of that story, I don't care who you are out there, believer, non-believer, the details about where the plane crashed, the nightmares about drowning in the water, because that's, his plane went down in the water. I mean, yes. It's freaky.
And that his nightmares stopped when his dad took him to the place where he died in Hiroshima.
Right. So, he he confronted it.
Yes, it was so amazing. But what I got from that, what was so fascinating, it was that we have to keep learning our lessons. And if we don't get the lesson, we keep coming back to do repeat. because his North Node was exact to the degree of his last experience. So I find that very fascinating. We don't just get to skip out and go, in the dirt and, go underneath the ground and, hope that there'll be a purple paradise with purple palm trees that's going to be better than what we got here.
Right, right. Yeah, I like that. I say that's it's a philosophy that I kind of stand by. I've come to, in over the last year, and I said it long ago, is Earth is a proving ground. And I think there's many, many, many Earths out there, planets like this, where they're proving grounds, where energy's here, depending on how you are here is where your energy goes next. And if, like you said, if you didn't get the lesson in this one, you get recycled to maybe get the lesson. Or perhaps you did such great things here that you get recycled because you're clearly needed here to kind of guide these weird people that are their path of life.
Right. And I believe that. I absolutely believe that. People come to me and they want to know, was this a suicide? Was this a murder? And I feel it in my body. So it's, although nobody's ever come to me and said, hey, I want you to talk, I'll be, the voice of the quote dead. But when people sit in front of me and they, I hear their name of either themselves or the people that are passed, or sometimes names will come in all on its own and I'll just intuit it. I'll feel in my own body as an empath, because I'm an empath, how they might have passed. But like recently I saw this chart that blew my mind in that they said, I want to know if it was a suicide or if it was just natural causes. And I looked at the chart and I had their birth time and birth death date and all that. It was interesting because I just asked the question. I said, this is weird because Venus is in Virgo in the 8th house and it was conjoined Mercury. I asked the question, were they cleaning when they died? Because Virgo is all about clean and neat and organization.
Right.
And interestingly enough, the guy died in his shed cleaning his lawnmower. Huh. And what is Mercury? It's something that moves. It's like anything that's transportable. It also rules communication. But the guy tried to get out of his shed. It was cold in the winter, and he was in there cleaning, but the lawnmower was on, which carbon monoxide took him. And it blew my mind, though, that was in his chart of endings.
So I see how it can be looked at as a suicide. He just ran that thing in there in a closed space.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when you're thinking in terms of shed, I don't know. Like, it's not like it's a sealed environment, so that they're, maybe the guy working on it's not considering the idea he might take in a lot of carbon dioxide.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And or what is one of my most fascinating stories that I heard from one of my clients is that this woman came to me and she had a dream that she was having a one-night stand on the beach with a guy that said in the dream, you're going to be a beautiful widow. And how weird, what a creepy dream, right?
Really?
What a nightmare. So time passes, a year passes, she forgets about that, meets this guy on the beach, has a one-night stand, gets pregnant immediately. And guess what? The guy's nowhere to be found. But she, interestingly enough, in her 8th month of pregnancy, finds out where he is. And guess what? She calls him. She says, guess what? I'm going to have a baby. He died that night of an overdose.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is.
It's like you can't make this stuff up. And which makes me believe that there are things that are predestined. And I see that in my dream space all the time, where I'll dream something and then it happens, which is why one of the big reasons why I got into this business. And it kind of sometimes freaks me out sometimes. I mean, you question, do you really want to know? But I think I sometimes like that if I'm forewarned about something, I can handle it in a different way. I'm observant, on
the subject of dreams, I was telling you in pre-podcast, I had a really crazy dream. Like it actually woke me up, and I'm not one to wake up from a dream. Right. And I think it's in part because I've been doing so much research on abductions, just really digging into this because I had, I'm doing a small abduction series. And so anyway, I go to sleep And in this dream, I'm laying down in my dream and I could feel my body is paralyzed. And I feel something touching the back of my head. And like, for whatever reason in this dream, I know it's an alien, right? And I start feeling, I ask it something like, are you here to do something? Are you going to help me with something? And I feel like what I thought anyway was my head being drilled into. And I fought in the dream to stand up. I stood up, and like I was my equilibrium was off, and I fought my way to the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror and I saw it on my back. And I like with this kind of tone, I was like, look at me. And it looked over me. I'm like, are you going to help me? What am I going to get out of this? But I wake up from the dream from that, where there's things on my back and I'm commanding it. Look at me. What are you going to do for me, et cetera, et cetera. And I wake up and I check my smartwatch because I have a Garmin Venue 2. So had my heart rate in real time. And my heartbeat's in the low 50s, like relaxed, not even excited. And what shocked me is how it wasn't fear in a dream. It was like this kind of like strange, like demanding position I was taking, because I want to know, what are you here? What am I going to, like, I kept saying that, what am I going to get out of this? Right. So, but I woke up from the dream. It's like 9 something in the morning and I just can't fall back asleep. And I made sure that I repeated over and over again what the dream was, what it entailed, the details, so I didn't forget. I just sat there for an hour repeating every detail because it was a very short dream. But it was bizarre because it felt real. And very seldomly do I have dreams where they feel so real, where you can feel the pressure in the back of your head or something like that. Of course, because of interviewing these people with experience, I'm touching the back of my head. Is there any marks there? I mean, there's nothing there. But the only I could think of is maybe because I've just been digging so deep into this that it played a role in my subconscious.
Truly. And now you talked about feeling paralyzed, right? Yeah.
In the dream, I was laying down on my right side and I definitely felt like I couldn't move because when I felt that presence in the dream touch the back of my head, ironically enough, I just kind of knew what it was. Because me personally, Darleen, I've never experienced anything in life. I've never seen a ghost. I've never seen an alien or a UFO, nothing. This is just a fascinating subject that I'm researching because I want to find some answers. And I think I just dug too deep into this one and it just affected me. Because ironically, I thought of you because I'm like, I already scheduled Darleen. I'm going to bring this up.
But was there anything else that you saw in the dream? Was there any elements? Was there anything at all?
Forget, in the beginning of the dream, a friend of mine was like, hey, did we take you to see the antheads? And like, even though he said that in the dream, I knew what he was referring to. And of course, what I was trying to do as a podcaster is, can we schedule this for Tuesday? I was going to try to schedule it, but that's what led to it. There's the only other elements. It's just, I was laying on my, I'm going to say my right side, because I felt the presence behind me and I felt like it was touching me and I felt like it was there. And then like by the sure will that I got up and fought when I felt it, like I think what I thought was drilling in my head. I fought myself to my feet in the dream, and I was like, and I ran for the bathroom as best I could and crashed through the door and looked in the mirror at it, and I saw it on my back. It was on my back, and I looked over and I'm like, look at me, and it was so demanding of me. So it wasn't really a nightmare, more than it was like a shocking event. But again, I checked my smartwatch as soon as I woke up, which I do all the time. And my heart rate was sleeping. I'm in the upper 40s, lower 50s typically. And I checked my heart for that night and nothing, no rise, no stress levels on my watch. So in the dream, I don't think there was fear based upon all of what I've looked into. It was a strange kind of demanding position I took. Like I expected it. Does it make sense?
Yes. A couple of things I want to comment about this is, and you mentioned the ant head. So that was like an indication that something was going to like remind you of your head, right? Your thought process, your thinking, right?
Right.
You had something on your back, something that you saw, but you couldn't see, right?
Right.
Isn't that right?
Right. Until I ran to the back, like in the dream, I when I say I broke to the back door, I mean, I ran that thing open and looked at the mirror at it, right? That's the only way I could see it. And it did look over at me. Like one half of its face is what I could see.
So you saw something. You saw a part of it.
I saw it on my back and its head turn over to look at me because I commanded it to look at me. and I was making these weird demands like, what are you going to do for me? Or something like that. Something to that effect.
Good that you faced it. because, sometimes these entities can come up, and I'm not saying that was what that was,
Right.
But I can talk about that. I went to this reminds me of a class that I took in Santa Barbara, where I went to this class at a college there, whatever that class was, Pacifica. Yeah. I just went for a weekend course on paralysis in dreams. Because this plagues a lot of people actually when they feel like they can't, they're absolutely immobilized. And, my takeaway, what I got from that, and sometimes when I've had dreams like that when I was younger, where I felt like something was holding me down or something was, stifling my energy at some level, to go in and like, where in your life do you feel powerless? You, though, in this dream, and then of course, then it can release, right? Because even though we might feel like we might be, quote, possessed by something, or an entity is attached. It sounds like you have an attachment to you or had it, but then you looked at it. And one thing that I've discovered is people can attract these entities. And I know that sounds crazy.
No, actually, I've had spoken to some investigators, both in paranormal and in ufology, and they say, careful, wishing to see these things, or careful to, don't open Pandora's box in short. And I'm a weird person. Like, I think I told you, like, if I see a Bigfoot, so I'm going to do a documentary. I'm going to travel. And if I see a Bigfoot, I'm not the guy who's going to zoom in with the camera. I'm running at that, so there's going to have to be a team with me to reel me in, and maybe another team for medical purposes. Cause I'm running at it. I'm one of these people.
You're chasing tornadoes, buddy.
Yeah. Exactly.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, I'm that guy in the middle of the night that's dark in my house and I hear a weird noise. I'm going to it. I got to see what this is. I'm the guy that dies in the movie right away, straight away. So.
Yeah, good. You're fearless. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of death. You keep coming back,
Right.
Right. I mean, it's just like my daughter. She said, we were talking about death one day, and she's like, don't worry. If you don't get it all done, Mom, you'll come back next time. I guess
right.
So much to do.
Yeah, because it appears to me in your bloodline, it seems like the relatives stay within the same circle, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My mom's so psychic. My aunt is so. She taught me about how to use my body as a antenna.
Right.
And my kids, I don't go see psychics, although once in a while I like to talk to my astrology buddies, and I got a favorite tea leaf, Haifa Erickson, tea leaf reader. She's great. But I don't, the psychic world is an interesting phenomenon. But back to the entities.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important. And I get a lot of calls about this. I get so many calls of house clearings, and I don't have time for all that. But what I do is I can help people, show them where, when they attract these entities, the attachments, these things that are, coming to a theater near you. And it sounds like for you, you had this experience where it's so in your psyche and you want to see it, right? You want to see these things. You so maybe even it's obsessed about seeing these entity alien abductions or whatever. You're hearing about it. I don't know if you're obsessed about that, but
I am as lately. Because the reason again is because I'm doing this short series about abductions. I'm actually speaking to people who have been abducted. Because normally in the podcast, I speak to investigators and people of research, and even the people that had experiences. We still lean towards the research end, and now lately I'm really trying to understand what these people went through, what were the benefits of it, what were the negatives of it, and oddly in this dream, rather than me confronting something with anger, it's like I was making demands. I was like negotiating. What am I going to get out of this? I found that part strange.
Well, can I touch on that for a minute?
Yes.
I don't be offended. I just want to, what my first hit about it is maybe you're thinking, okay, out of all this research that you're doing, what are you going to get out of this? Are you going to get more subscribers? Are you going to is YouTube going to pay you extra money? I don't know. Maybe some part of you is like, you're doing all this research, but there is some part of you. It's like, okay, well, is there any benefit for me giving out to the world all this information? I don't know. We all have our own thing.
It's strange because, I told this story. I don't even know if I told you. When I was a kid, we used to sneak out of the house in the middle of the night and go play manhunt in Florida with all the gators and shit around because we were crazy kids. And we were playing manhunt, my friends and I, middle of the night, and there's this big lake in the middle of this wooded area. And all my friends say they saw these stick figures on the other side of the lake. They were all pretty shocked by it. I didn't see anything. So I ran. I ran all the way into the wooded area, around to this lake to go see what these things were. And I got there and I was like, damn it, I never see anything. And, when it dawns you, like, I just ran over here. There's snakes, spiders, and gators. The real things to be afraid of, I just disregarded running to see whatever this was. So at the end of the day, I don't know. You could be right. Maybe it's some sort of drive what I get as far as a podcast, or do I just really want to see one of these things?
Well, I'll tell you something that happened to me that it left because I became fearless about it. I took these classes, shaman classes, and I thought, oh, I can handle, hanging out with the dead and doing, exorcisms, right? People come to me all the time for this stuff. I might as well embrace it and learn it and not fear it. Okay, so my very first exorcism that I ever performed, which I do not want to sign up for this. Don't call me for this stuff. I'm going to educate you guys so you don't have to call me.
Right.
But I did a depossession off of a guy who just got out of jail, and he had a gun on him, and anyway, he had some aggression to deal with. And as I was pulling this energy out of him, I can tell you, he said to me, something just attached your head. He saw it.
Right.
I felt it in the moment. And it was an energy that was like a density. Like sometimes when you hold your hands together, you could feel your own auric field.
Right.
This thing came home with me. And nothing I could do. I mean, nothing I did could get this energy off. The bath, the salt bath, I felt it. And interestingly enough, when that night, my TV came on all by itself. When I came home, the TV, and my now ex-husband said he kept turning off the power because it kept coming back on 3 times. He's like, there's something wrong with these batteries. I'm like, oh no. Little did he know what I just did at work.
Right.
And this thing, oh my goodness, it would blare the volume in the middle of the night. My mother-in-law was living with me at the time, and us. And anyway, this thing would wake us up in the middle of the night and almost like try to intimidate. It was a very weird experience because you didn't know when it was going to happen. And what we figured out, and my mother-in-law would get me up in the middle of the night, get up, pray. And I swear to you, no amount of prayer, no calling the archangels, no calling Jesus, no calling Mother Teresa, nobody could, all my spirit guides that I call, my archangels to do readings with me. No, nobody was here for me. And even my daughter at the time, who was just 3 at this time, she would say, Mom, the ghost is here. And I don't even know where she got that word ghost, because I referred to it as an entity. And I'm like, whoa, how did she, and we never watched Casper,
Right.
How did she know that term? Kind of bizarre. Anyway, I don't know how she picked that word up. I mean, I really don't, because I don't recall. Anyway, point is, she would know when it was here. And I said to her, what does the ghost need? And she's so cute. She goes, it needs a ghost bed. Well, what I noticed about this entity, and a lot of people call me around, again, house clearings for entities and whatever, or ghosts, is this place haunted? Perhaps, but how you can deal with these creatures, and they are real. I feel them. You can just feel them, like attaching to your lower realms. Sometimes when you walk into a bar, you can feel certain entities that are just in a lower vibration, if you will. Or as my teacher, one of my teachers, Betsy Bergstrom, taught that, you could be walking past the bar and you have no inclination to go in there. And all of a sudden you have this attachment coming on you. And then you go in and you're, happily married, and you're going in there and you're doing things you would never have done,
Right.
because something can attach to you and maybe even slightly possess you. But what I got from this entity, and it's been very, very informative for me, is that what I learned as what is in the dark always ends up coming to light, no matter what it is. And what I gathered is that when this entity would come, it would bring chaos. And my ex and I now would fight. We'd have arguments. We'd have these dramas. And I realized it was like, I said, it was interesting because one day, and this thing would flick on the lights. It would just like be intimidating. I was like wondering, I never believed in poltergeists, to be honest, until this thing came into my house. I thought that was all fiction and hocus pocus. Nah, it's all BS. Anyway, I didn't believe in it until it was entered my own home, and it was the night of that exorcism. Well, I had to face it, and I had to ask what it was about and what it wanted from me. What does it want from me? Like yours wanted from you. What did you want from it?
Right.
What does it want from me? And what I got was that this entity would only come on the nights that my ex and I had a disagreement. It was almost like it brought the energy, or one would come before the other. But it was such a chaotic month because this was in our house for a month, and nothing we did, no sage, nothing, no prayer, nothing could get rid of this. And one day I said, you know what? We cannot argue in front of our kids. Let's be conscious about this. This is not okay. Immediately, this entity went into the baby toy, And, that is when, not only did my ex and I have this aha moment, you're right. We can't do this. I opened up the window and I said, get out. And I mean it. And this was where I became fearless because I realized this was what it was. It was, we had to master our reaction.
Right.
So when you get these entities in your house, they can come around anger. They can come around people who've got, a lot of drugs and alcohol in their energy field, or you walk into a house that's been haunted. It hasn't been released, or maybe these people fear it. So they can attract a house situation of being haunted. But ghosts are nothing to fear. It's like I tell my kids, if we run into an energy like that, ghosts need to be loved too. So just,
that's a good point. So this particular one feeds on negativity, right? So that's why it lingers. And then there's probably the other spirits that are around that you don't see ever because they feed on pleasant peace. So they're a peaceful spirit, right? Because
absolutely. And protective spirits.
Right.
Absolutely.
Another part too, and it always made me think, because this is this is a 4 billion year old planet-ish, right? And there's a very strong chance that beings and other life forms are here long before dinosaurs, right? They've come and gone, they've collapsed. This planet's probably been cleansed, I don't know how many times. So when you are dealing with a dark energy or a light one in any regard, when you're dealing with an energy that's here, it predates religion and it predates humanity. It predates even the dinosaurs. When we're using religious jargon with them, or what we know today to dismiss spirits, it might not work, right? Because to them, they're like, what is this guy talking about? Like, ark who? Because to them, they're the energy, the architect, the as most people call it, God, has created life here multiple times. There's been shot after shot after shot. So that always struck me as a curiosity. Like, what if something predates all of this? And how do you remove it? And then for you, so you don't do exorcisms anymore, right? You said?
No, I just try to guide them to watch their temper, master the reaction, and also get away from addiction, because those are the lessons that are around these entities.
Right.
I don't want to go in. You can go do all the salt baths and sage and calling in the spirits to bless a house, but if you don't get the lesson, it's going to stick around.
Right, because that's what it feeds on.
Yes, this thing left when I got the lesson, when I, and for that, I was grateful. This entity was my gift. It really was. It was, as odd as that sounds. Yes, it possessed our TV. Yes, it took over the lights. Yes, it took over the toys in the baby room, but we needed to learn it. And here I have to master myself in that way, you know?
Yeah, because you're talking about, so when people hear that and like, God, it doesn't sound feasible, like understand what these energies are. They're energy. And for them to touch, and I said this, I think recently, if an entity wants to touch you, whether it be out of love or hate, it's going to feel the same. They got to manipulate energy. It's not going to be pleasant. And they would use energy to manipulate energy. So that makes sense to me. That computes.
But I also have to say, when I got the lesson and I realized my ex and I are no longer, we aren't aligned, he was a great teacher for me to, capture the sword, to lay it aside and forgive him for we know not what we're doing.
Right.
Right. He was my mirror. He was my teacher at some level for me to work on all that I needed to hone within myself. But what ended up happening, it was perfect, is once we got this lesson, and once I got it, he had to go. It was like, okay, that's it. It was done. And I was grateful for that exchange because, my experience, my life has been an ascension manual, if you will.
Right.
So, to all your listeners, don't fear those entities. Just lean into it. What is it asking from you? What is it asking for you to resolve and master within yourself? And when you don't fear those things, they do go. But if they come back around, you got some inner work to do or mastering the addiction.
Yeah, especially when you're feeding them exactly what they want. Because why would you, like anything else, if you're getting fed somewhere, you're going to stay where the food is.
Right. And if people fear it, more energies and more activity can come, more things, objects moving. You hear about this, you hear about doors, slamming. I hear all kinds of things, But I also have a good kind of ghost story. And I don't know if it was an entity or a protective spirit. I don't know. This was an interesting, when I moved to an apartment back in my college days, I asked for protection. Well, this thing I'm going to call it a thing, whatever it was guide, spirit guide. That's what I called it.
Right.
It would literally push on the aluminum sliding closet door and wake me up. Ironically, every morning, I didn't need an alarm clock. I'd get up, I'd have my coffee, and within 15 minutes, the phone would ring and I'd be asked to do a reading. And I did all this all before noon so that I could go to school and get my college degree. Huh. But what was weird about this spirit is it was such a teacher for me too, because I had an encounter once where I met a client and, the client asked me out. And anyway, this was a no-no because I learned that you don't mess with your clients.
Right. Right.
And this client came to my home and I made dinner. It was interesting. And I still don't have an answer for why this happened, but I was making dinner fish and I put the fish in a glass pan on top of the stove, on an electric stove, where in between the burners was just this flat surface. And right when this guy knocked on the door, the glass pan shattered. I'm like, wow. What the heck? Is that normal? I don't understand. I thought glass could be a conductor of heat. I didn't it was crazy. And anyway, so we didn't get to have our dinner, right. But we ended up on the couch. And just when he kissed me, I swear to God, it was crazy. The candle box, candle holder with like a centimeter inch thick, the flame got so big. I guess it was against the way it was. I don't know why this doesn't make sense to me, but it also cracked in that moment. It was like, okay, you got to go.
So let's ask, why did the client come to you for what?
He came to me for a reading.
Okay. Now, is it very possible that, you have this guy over, you're making dinner, and the energy is like, nope, this one's mine. You got it bought out. You know what I mean? Maybe that was him. Maybe he felt that.
And the spirit, yes, exactly. And, the spirit that was in my home, I brought somebody else back to my bedroom. And guess what? I know it's too much information, but that boom, that pound that it wakes me up in the morning came when the guy and I entered my bedroom, and the guy's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's just my spirit guide." I had a couple guys freak out about that. So yeah. I felt like I was meant to be sort of this, isolated, only don't get distracted by guys, focus on your work, just serve and get through college and, but interestingly enough, I had a dream once that I was being placed in the back of a blue blazer. And I was feeling at that time in my life, I was donation only. And I always made it. I did. But it was always by the skin of my teeth. I just, I had some guilt feelings about receiving money for doing this work, but I wanted to get through college, but I was really on the edge, and I had this dream that I was being placed in the back of a blue blazer. Well, the next day I got hit by a blue blazer, and I thought, oh, I just don't want to have to manifest crazy drama accidents in order for the universe to take care of me. And I had that awareness. And right then I had a flash, call it an apparition, whatever it was. It was a moment of seeing this spirit, if you will. It wasn't a real person. It was a spirit. But I saw that he was dressed in a monk's robe and had glasses that reminded me of Indian Gandhi. And I thought it was ironic because in a way, I strangely feel like that protective spirit was keeping all men away from me in order to perhaps maybe meet my husband, who was from India. Huh. So and that was foretold to me too, in a strange way, where some guy walks in my office and says, "Hey, I'm going to give you a reading." And I'm like, "What?" And he's just mentioned something in 33 days. He actually said something, your black magic spell will have been lifted. Huh. And little did he know, of 3.5 years of your last 3.5 year relationship. And I'm like, oh my God, how did that guy know that I was in exactly a 3.5 year relationship? It was strange to me that this stranger walked into my office and said all this and gave me a reading, didn't ask for anything, didn't ask for money, and just namaste and left. It was that weird.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, my previous relationship was 3.5 years. And me and my girlfriends of 12, did this quote burning ritual in order to manifest. And that's exactly what happened. Within 5 days, boom, I meet this person that I intuited that I would meet when I was only 9 years old. Oh, goodness. And I waited all my life to meet him. And in fact, when I met him, I said, wow, you're 41 and never been married. And he said, well, I hadn't met you yet. And I'm such a sucker for charm, right?
Right. Yeah. That's that line in itself, right?
Yeah, gosh. But so that relationship ended, and that was a very profound spiritual evolution in and of itself. That was beautiful, a spirit experience. I'll say that. But,
it's this thing where here's what I currently believe. Every human being, the brain's pretty much, it's the same computer. It's mass produced, right?
Yeah.
With the exception of people like you and others, where you have a different kind of software, different download. So you're able to perceive and receive things that others can't. And that's the biggest problems with humans, is that they cast doubt on things like psychic powers or the paranormal. They lack the software to perceive it. And sometimes I wonder to myself, maybe I don't have software, right? Maybe that's why I don't. A long time ago, a friend of ours had a house over in Florida, and it was a big house, and it was alleged that it was haunted. And everyone in my circle of people said they've gone there in the middle of the night. They've had disturbances every time, like clockwork. So I go stay there. We're drinking beer. We're hanging out. I stay up all night because I want to hear something or see something. And I finally nod off. I finally nod off. And the next day, they're like, oh, man, that was crazy. And I'm like, well, again, I don't get nothing. So it's I think some people just, I don't know if it's the software or if it's just that they don't like me, I
don't know that it's not that they don't like you. It's just that you're not afraid of them. You're fearless. I think everybody has, as you quote, the software.
Right.
Most of us don't use it.
Right.
Like we should. I always pray to serve. And from that prayer, I believe it comes to me. That's my devotional.
It could be, maybe you're right. So for me, it's self-serving. I just want to witness something. I want to be a part of it. Because if tomorrow I saw a ghost, even though right now, based on all the research I've done and all the people I speak to, like yourself, there's some affirmation that there's definitely an afterlife. Because at the end of the day, I'm still questioning, well, what's my purpose here? If I pass away, do I go on, or is that just it? That's the big question. So for me, if I see a ghost tomorrow, I'm relaxed. There's really not. What more can you possibly fear when you know to a certainty that there's more after this? You know what I mean? There's no fear anymore. You just live life. You enjoy every day because you're not worried about the end of the road per se.
Well, sometimes I don't know about ghosts, but I wonder if people that pass that you're calling ghosts are stuck in a medium place where they're, like one time my friend took me by this place down in Chinatown and he goes, okay, what do you feel right here? And immediately my head hurt like hell. And it turned out that there was a mass murder there.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you said that. I just had Roberta Grimes on not long ago. She studies the afterlife, NDEs, etc. And I brought that up to her too. I'm like, I wonder how many of these, when I say ghost or spirit, but residual energy, how many of them are here because something they got shot and died instantly, car accident, died instantly, and their energy's like, what the hell happened? We weren't prepared for this. Our greeting party wasn't here. They're kind of stuck in limbo here and then let's say someone like Darleen comes by, like, well, this person could see me and maybe I could communicate. What happened to me? How do I get past this? What do I need to do? Because for me, I'm a pretty nostalgic person. I like my memories and I like being me. And so I think part of my issue at the end of the road is that I wouldn't want to let this place go, and maybe I'll be a residual too, right?
Could be. But I also believe that the spirit world, afterworld, can help us. One of my most interesting stories around this, well, I have a lot of stories, I do, but because I've been confronted with them every day. But when I was going through my divorce, I asked my spirits, and especially I just called out to my dad, help me find a good lawyer. And I did some research, right? On the third attorney, I'm throwing down my credit card for the deposit. And I just happened to say, what's your birthday? And I'll be darned if it was not my dad's birthday,
wow.
My stepdad's. Yeah. And interesting, I had a dream that guy was going to lift the bill. Now, who's going to lift the bill?
Yeah.
Of course, I paid a lot of money down. He had a lot of money down already. Plus, as we went, but the final bill in the final phase, and he got a lot of money out of me, but God bless him. But in the final bill, I had this 8-page diatribe of all the things that I thought were unethical. And because I woke up in this dream, I'm thinking, why would my attorney ever not charge me? And I just got so mad about the injustice at the end. Of how he, said, oh, you don't really need me to go down and sign that divorce decree. And then on the day of, he's like, oh, I got nothing better to do. And he charged me $2,400 for that hour. I'm like, what? Wow. That was expensive 20 minutes.
Yeah, really?
And I just called him out on it. And anyway, he ended up sending me a note back saying, forget it. It's because I said, if you really need to charge me for all of this, I'm going to have to question it with the bar.
Yeah, really, because that's $2,400, man. You better come over and make some dinner, clean the house or something.
I did, and thank God my sweet nanny helped me take some of the emotion and charge out of it to help me edit it. But he helped me tremendously, but not really in the end.
Yeah. I mean, terrible.
God bless.
Hopefully with dreams with me, don't become a pattern, because, and I said this in, I think it was with Roberta Grimes. I told her about it. I think I had a dream, somewhere in July, had a group of dreams where someone was coming after me with a gun, and per usual in the dreams that I recall, is just, I'm just taking up arm. I'm ready to defend myself. Right. And then literally like a week later, I won't name the establishment, but it's here locally. I hang out there on occasion. A gun went off in the stall next to me. Someone had a gun on them. And it didn't dawn on me till I got home. And then the girl's like, hey, do you remember that dream you told me about? And then I clicked. I'm like, oh, yeah. So right after that, this most recent dream with this thing on my back I was telling you about, I sat up and said, if you're trying to give me some sort of gift, pass. I'd rather not know. I want to go see an alien, or I want to see a Bigfoot, or see a ghost. I don't want to know the future for any kind of reason ever, because I overanalyze. I cannot do what you do, Darleen, because I'm one of these people that it would probably prevent me from going out.
Oh, yeah. Don't be afraid of it.
I like to just go out into the world. I mean, brave it out. What's going to happen. I can handle it. If I can't, then I guess I couldn't, So
Dream worlds are really interesting. I had a dream once, speaking of the dead, I didn't understand why I dreamt about this young girl who had she was showing me her throat and a snake was around her. And I thought, what the heck? Why did I just dream that? The very next day, and I saw exactly what she looked like with her short brown hair. And the next day, her mother came to me and said that her daughter had died, and was she around? And who was it but a woman who, this 22-year-old girl had an undiagnosed thyroid disorder, which caused her to have a heart attack.
Wow.
Yes. Wow. So this stuff is kind of bizarre. And I mean, for these people that show up in my office, and here I am, the night before I'm sleeping, dreaming about, and I wake up like, why did I just dream that? So, and I dream a lot about my client world, which is, it's like sometimes my life isn't my own that way.
So there's this woman in south of Florida, just north of Miami. I've been I want to get her on the show because at some point I was like, I want to get a really powerful psychic and talk to him, et cetera, et cetera. And anyhow, through mutual friends and long-term contact and months, I finally got in touch with this woman, and she's 72 years old. And I said, hey, I mean, you're a lot of people speak highly of you locally anyway. She doesn't advertise. She doesn't charge. I said, why don't you advertise or charge him? You have a real gift from some of these people are telling me. She's like, listen, don't take this the wrong way, but I have no interest in speaking on a show. I don't charge. Long story short, it was like a burden to her, an emotional burden on her that people or entities were contacting her to contact people here. And it just sounds to me like she's just worn out, completely worn out. So for you, when you're doing this, it's a lot on you, Darleen. That's a lot. That's emotionally a lot. How do you handle that?
Oh, it's so true. If they are on my table and they're expressing something and they're trying to suppress not crying, I'll feel it and I'll start tearing up. It's such a bizarre transference. I swear it's an interesting observation I've seen, but yes, it is. And I feel like a zombie at the end of the day, but I do it and I love to do it. It challenges me,
Yeah. And then you have purpose to serve, because I couldn't. I also on the podcast we talk about true crime, and I have detectives on, and more recently I'd spoken to Norm Pardo about the OJ case, and I got to tell you, there's some things about the OJ case I didn't know, but anyhow, I was doing.
Tell me, that's my very first published article was about
that case is I'm going to be doing another episode on it, and so I would advise listen to the first one, and then the next episode with Norm, I'll fill you. But I'll talk to you off podcast about that. All I can tell you is
I'd like to know, because he would, if he wasn't. I don't want to get into that, but I have the one thing I always wondered was if he was quote innocent. Why did he drive so far? The chase, remember that chase on TV?
It's not that he was innocent. It's also not that he did it. It's just he was a component in it, and it riddled him with guilt, right? And then there's that guilt is that none of this would happen had something not taken place that I played a part in, right? It's a crazy twist and turn case, which ultimately led me to read about another unsolved case from that era. Was John Benet Ramsey?
Oh yeah,
that broke my heart. I didn't even know about that till recently. I recently read about it. I mean, I was a kid when that happened, so I didn't pay attention to the news. And when I'm reading about, and like OJ for me as a kid, that was so big. It was basically a daytime TV. It was that big, But the John Benet Ramsey thing, things like that break my heart. This is a child. And so then I think about what psychics like you do. And then, if you're channeling people or there's children involved, the emotional toll that's got to take on you has got to be astronomical. Although some might say that they found that where they are is more peaceful. It's still tough because there's people here that love that person. And there's a lot of anguish and heartbreak here still. So it's the whole realm of it is tough. I can imagine.
But did they ever solve that? That case went away.
Yeah, it's unsolved to this day. I mean, there's speculation. There's a lot of speculation, but there's really nothing else to it. So I'm going to start digging into that now. The reason I dug into the OJ thing was... I
would love to see her birth chart. That would just be a great study.
Yeah, the OJ thing, a friend of mine told me about this documentary, and I watched it. It was with Norm Pardo. And here's the irony of this. the majority of the information from OJ's case is either sealed or redacted. And I'm like, well, it's OJ. This isn't like it was JFK. It's a very bizarre story. Now I'll be putting out more about it because I'm looking deeper into it. Also was going to talk to you about that too. Like, maybe consulting you before taking on some of these cases to get your opinion and insight.
Oh yeah. I got to tell you, and by the way, about OJ Simpson, Jean Houston actually predicted, she's a psychic.
Right.
You might want to interview her. She, predicted that he wouldn't suffer jail, but the first time on that case, but he would go to jail for a civil matter, and in which he did.
Yeah. He's crazy, OJ, man. I'm not saying he's not crazy. He does impulsive shit. I don't, through that whole case, looking at this guy and the way he behaved, and I mean, Ron Goldman was a big dude with a black belt, and by the marks on his body, he fought whoever was killing him hard. He fought him hard, and OJ had a cut on his finger. OJ, according to the offensive abrasions on this guy, Ron, I'm pretty sure his assailant took a bit of a beating in that fight. At least a black eye, something. OJ was unremarkable other than his cut in his hand. So, I saw remorse and guilt and all this shit on OJ, but I am convinced he didn't actually do it. I think he was a component in it, and I think that's where his guilt comes from. I think he was going there to confront Nicole, and it escalated, and he left, and this other guy, which you'll hear in that, listen to that OJ podcast episode with Norm Pardo I did.
Well, he didn't have the right fit on the glove, right? But what was interesting about OJ's hand, I saw, because I'm a palmist, is that OJ's finger, and it actually points. When you have a crooked finger pointing out, like the pinky is your Mercury. Sometimes people's pinkies point in, kind of like if you hold it up, they look like little devils. Right. They can be writers, prolific exaggerators, embellished car salesmen.
Yeah.
But OJ's, I noticed, pointed outward, which to me represents like he could lie to the public, Oh,
of course.
Right.
Yeah. But beyond a doubt he could. I mean, part of, I think in that trial, they didn't ask the right questions. Like questions like, well, if not you, who? They didn't ask that. They were hyper focused on him. If they didn't ask questions like, well, where did you go after there, and why did you leave, et cetera. I mean, there's so much they missed in that. And to me, I don't know. When you read when you speak with Norm Pardo and you read, his chronological order of what happened, and then you try to look up public records and see him, not just, it's not just that it's sealed, but some of it's redacted. Like it, that's classified material that gets redacted, not a murder case. That's crazy, And this guy,
the alibi, right? He jumped on a plane to Chicago or something back then.
Well, yeah, he left. But there's this guy that was in his life, a serial killer, Glenn Rogers, and OJ didn't even know him as Glenn Rogers, nor did Nicole or whatever, or any of the people in that area. He was using the identity of someone he killed before going to LA. So.
Whoa.
And this is a known serial killer that they caught even after. And so I think there's also a bit of a black eye factor for, the LAPD at that time, that they didn't look further into this guy and to find out later he was a serial killer. And the way he killed the women, there's a lot of parallels to Nicole's death and the death of the women, his other victims. I mean, I got to tell you, it's shocking. Years of this information perfect out there. Norm speaks it, and nothing. We get nothing out of it. So I don't know. It's bizarre. So
I want to see that podcast.
Yeah. So take a listen to it. He goes in and we're going to speak in greater depth of it coming soon, right? Because that was the intro to it. There's a lot of trial and error there. So, but speaking in terms of so here's the other one I wanted to ask you. People that were murdered, when they visit you, what's that like? Or when that happens, or if it does, what is that like?
That's where these people's parents show up, or even for suicides for that matter. These are the homes that are the most haunted. Right. Really, this is where you hear the most activity is when there's either a suicide or there's been a murder and it's just unresolved.
Right.
But as far as the crime world, that I'm so empathic. I once had a dream back in my early days that I was fascinated with, because I initially was as in the world of criminal psychology. I wanted to go study that and go work with people in the prisons and help them forgive themselves and forgive their abusers, and because they need love too, right?
Right.
In the early days when I was doing readings at Zenith Supplies, I had this client, and I dreamt about her being robbed the same night that she was being robbed. I saw it. I was there. I was there as an observer in the dream while it was happening in her house in real life. And so, but it so shook me and it jarred me energetically, like the whole day. I just, and then of course I saw her, and sure enough, that happened. So I'm not really, I don't prefer that kind of thing, because I'd be out there praying for them if I was in the dream space. Right. I know myself. I'd be like, don't do it, pray, right? I just like I pray to reach Putin's consciousness, right? Because we're, on the brink of this crazy, this whole, and I don't even want to say it because I don't want to put energy on it, right? But there's so much fear in the air about what's happening with the nuclear war potential with that in Ukraine. Like, we got to be careful that we don't project the fear, because then we'll see that, right?
Right.
But I had a dream that I couldn't reach Putin's consciousness. And I don't know if he just sleeps in lead chambers or what.
From what I understand, he's isolated in a space that, I guess could handle a rocket blast. So it's not impossible.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't think so. To relieve your fear of nuclear war, we know about nukes. We know they exist. We know hypersonic missiles exist now. We know this. What we don't know is the black programs of our country, So when they see China demonstrating their hypersonic missiles where they're crazy fast, and the United States is like, cool. So it should convey a message that we got. Keep in mind, Ronald Reagan discussed the Star Wars program, where we have lasers that would intercept intercontinental missiles. Now, that you don't hear about it anymore, right? But we know that, I don't know, how many satellites have been launched since the Reagan era? It's an impossible number, right? To our knowledge anyway. And I follow rocket launches pretty religiously, and more often than none, do you have like one of these rockets lifting, and the stuff on board is considered classified. They don't speak about it, because that's when you know it's our military stuff. They don't say what it is, but anyhow, no matter how fast your rocket is, whether it be a rocket or a hypersonic rocket, it's still not traveling as fast as light. And if you think what a laser is, it's concentrated light, and that's an instant. No matter where it points, it's instantly there. So even if there's a hypersonic rocket flying through the air, a laser is going to grab it long before it makes touchdown. So, I mean, I have to believe that anyway, because there's no way we're still using, rockets as a defense mechanism. Otherwise, that's as good as saying our intelligence is still in the Stone Age. We've evolved. Our technology evolves way faster than people, extremely fast. And so much so that there's probably an iPhone 40 already, but they can't introduce it because, they got to drip feed that kind of technology. It'd be overwhelming, so to alleviate some of that stress, I personally don't think anyway that nukes are going to play the greater role. Now, it's the technologies that we don't speak about publicly. That's what worries me, that stuff. And it's not even Russia that worries me. It would be the United States and China. These are two nations that develop programs that they keep really suppressed. So if they see United States or China testing out hypersonic missiles, try to imagine what we're not showing, Crazy business. So for you, Darleen, Darleen, moving forward, what do you plan to do in the psychic realm? What would you like to do?
What would I like to do? Well, I mean, at this point, I want to reach as many people as I possibly can on a soul level to help them transform their life, to help them be more compassionate, to help them master their own inner demons, and to help your brother, right? Ultimately, right. I want to make a film. That's something that I desire to do, and about maybe a kind of a rom-com psychological thriller about my life, kind of make it fun and yet intersperse some moments, some words that might reach people's psyche. I would love to be, if I weren't doing this work and I'd be, involved in peacemaking throughout the world. I wish I could go, have a chat with our presidential, foreign leaders, be diplomat of bringing in peace and having, talks that we somehow could just, instead of all these threats, because, I don't like the thing that I don't like what's happening right now is that, and maybe we've always lived this way. Maybe we've always had this looming threat of war. There's always been, and other than COVID, right? That was the only time that we didn't have the fear of war because everybody was at home.
Yeah, the uncertainty was universal at that point.
Right.
Right.
But that's no way to live. And, I heard today on the radio that, they've got this asteroid that's outside our planet. I mean, like, here we are. United States is a bully country. I'm sorry. We get away with so much. We threaten. We're the ones that get to have all the power. We're the ones that get to have all the nukes. We're the ones that get to, have all this dominant power. And if anybody else has it, then we go after it. It just doesn't seem right or fair. But
sure.
What did I hear today?
Keep in mind though. Yeah, I'm not denying that we are not that. But what I am saying is, imagine if we weren't, and China was that, and look how they treat their people. Out there, out there. There's a system, a social system, right? There's like a score, and if your score doesn't meet the right criteria, you don't get internet or entertainment or even worse. At least here in this country, if we debate or we have an argument or we have differences, we at least get to have those differences. In some of these other countries, there is no shot. You don't have an opinion. You don't get to protest. You don't get to form your opinion publicly. China disappeared a billionaire once because he formed an opinion about their government they didn't like. They just disappeared him. And when he came back, his whole mindset was different. He was pro-government right after that. So we kind of have to sometimes.
The social system's coming for us. I don't know if that pandemic was all about getting us to, shift our currency and.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just don't.
But at the end of the day, I agree with you. We find negative things and try to, on the back of that, use fear to control. And this is exampled in the news. Whenever you hear the news, like where I live, we had a hurricane coming, and when the newscasts are on, they're like, the hurricane's coming, and they use tones that are almost make you unsettled, as opposed to them just speaking of it openly and forming some opinions on it. They speak to that because they want you glued, and that's because sadly. Humans, we feed on stupid negative shit. It's why reality TV is so successful, because we want to see that grim outcome, and we want to be able to say, "Well, that's not me, and I'm better than them for this reason." It's crazy, it's nuts.
Well, you've had to brace for a lot of them, I'm sure, right?
Indeed. Here I am. I don't know how, and I mean, like every time I live in the Tampa Bay area, and we dodge a lot of bullets with these storms. It's crazy. Like they either whip left or whip. This last one was coming dead for us. We were prepared here for it, for a hurricane direct hit. And at the last moment, it went south and across the state. I was like, that's bizarre. But the fear of that's always around here constantly. Although, to be honest, when I'm driving around, you'll see the majority of other people by the beach with surfboards waiting for that wave. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, when storms come here to Florida, you'd be surprised. People travel here that surf. They come here for that. It's insanity, but they do it. It's not spoken about on the news because I guess it's not as doom and gloom as they'd like it to be, but they do it. So.
Well, you see that in them. That's a little in you, Adam, from what I just gathered.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm one of those I got to go see, let's see what this is about. I take videos like where I lived. I used to live right on the beach, and we had a massive storm coming in. There was water, and I'm out there with a camera recording. So wow. That's just, I'm that kind of person. I got to see it. I got to know it. I got to know the facts of it. So that's why I talk to, I want to speak to people like Darleen who see that other side that I can't see, because it interests me. And at the end of the day, let's be honest, it will satisfy my train of thought as far as my mortality's question. That's really what it comes to. It's me questioning my mortality and my curiosity in the same note.
Yeah, speaking of that, with the South Node, the Moon's node in the axis of the chart, like if you have a south node, for instance, I saw this woman who, we were talking about death, and I looked at her south node, and it was a water aspect, and it was like, there was a hard square aspect, which creates challenges. And I asked her, I said, do you fear the water? Do you know how to swim? And she said, no, I'm deathly afraid of water. And she felt like she had died in previous life drowning. And it makes so much sense when you see something like that in the chart. You can't really exactly know maybe what you were in the previous life, or maybe you can, I don't know. Past life regression is powerful. I know, Brian Weiss, I did his program where, do you know who he is? Many Masters, Many Lives, that book?
It's familiar to me, and I'm actually going to be looking into that.
That's a good one. It's that one you would really dig, because he's a psychiatrist, and he was a very what is it? He was very neutral. He wasn't looking for this. He actually accidentally came upon past life regression in his hypnotherapy. He didn't have that intent, and he was very vulnerable to feeling ostracized from his community with his with that kind of woo-woo stuff, because he was so skeptical. But that's an interesting book to observe, and his research behind how, when he hypnotized someone, that she knew more about him than even his personal closest people. So, and I mean, there's so many countless stories. I have a client that, this is kind of cool, where the kid, she tried to get her son to take a picture in a suit, her 5-year-old. And don't you want your kids to, when you grow up, to see you in a suit when you're so young? And his response was, I've already had kids in my previous life. I've already had 3 kids. I'm not going to have kids in this one. A 5-year-old.
Wow.
Like, what?
Yeah, it's like, this time I'm going to be rich, wealthy, and travel.
That's right. Those are the people that have Sag rising and Jupiter and Taurus in their second, or whatever, like aspecting their second house of money.
It's bizarre, because for me, maybe it's part the unknown, or maybe it's just a fear of, I don't like flying. I swear to God, every time I get on an airplane, it's like the last day of my life, every time, and there's one example. In 2015, I was going to Las Vegas to play 9-ball in the U.S. Nationals. And on this plane ride, the plane's getting turbulence. It's bouncing. I'm freaking out, and I pan to my right, and there's this little kid smiling, staring at me.
He's having fun. It was a ride.
And all in my mind is like, does this kid not know better? Is he something mentally wrong with him, or is it just me? And then you look around the plane, and no one seems to be reacting like me, but I'm sweating bullets. So I hate flying. I just personally don't like the idea of being up in an airplane. If something goes wrong, the likelihood of me surviving that is very minimal. It's well out of my control. Although more people die in car accidents, still, I feel like in a car accident, I have some control over it, even though maybe not. But I don't know, Darlene, you get me in a plane, I'm panicking. And I'll never forget that kid's face, ever. Looking at me with a little smile. He had to be about, I guess him at 4 or 5, just smiling. All this turbulence in the plane, I'm just in anguish. So.
He was just your angel in that moment. He was just trying to say, calm down. It's going to be fine. The kids know more sometimes.
Yeah, probably right. So I spent the majority of that fight thinking, wow, this kid is really cool in this kind of turbulence. I'd be screaming if I was a kid on this. So I don't know. It's bizarre.
I have a funny story about a plane. I was on a plane once, and I'm not normally nervous. I always ask God to bless my flight, right? That might help. But I'm on the plane, and the turbulence comes. And instead of him saying, please fasten your seatbelts, captain comes on and just said, seatbelts.
If that were me, I'd be in a complete way. He just said seatbelts with authority. I'd be in a panic.
Manner, just seatbelts.
I would be. Oh. I feel like every plane should have ejection seats with parachutes. I
don't know. Oh man. But a lot of planes, you've got to think about it. Planes go off every day, and they're actually the safest way to travel if you look at the statistics.
Truth, because I've never had a death-defying experience on a plane legitimately. Just for me, I was dying every time because of the turbulence and et cetera. especially when you ever go to Las Vegas, when you touch down, you're going over mountains. And when you take off, it looks like you're going right to the mountains. So yeah, there's panic. But my closest brush with death in a traffic thing was I was on a motorcycle and I heard like screeching wheels. I looked behind me and there was a car screeching my way. I dumped my bike. Now, granted, this older woman didn't hit me or threaten to hit me directly. She did stop in time, but I still dumped my bike. And the reality was, you don't even have to be driving this thing to be killed. So I got rid of the bike.
What was going on right before that happened in your mind? What was going on that day?
I was on the way to a pool hall to play in a tournament. So my mind was like, I do this. I have this ritual where I get myself mentally ready for any competition. And that ritual consists of me saying, I got this. I'll beat anybody, et cetera, et cetera. It's that mental hype where and then you're in your mind going over it. You visualize the win. I always do that. I visualize my wins. I'm not one to hope about it. I just visualize a win.
And I bet you do.
Yeah. So I walk into most places with the kind of confidence, like I feel like I'm going to win. I mean, I got this, so anyway, I had earbuds in. I was listening to music at a low tone. I keep them low enough so I could hear for horns. And I heard, I immediately turned over my right shoulder and I see this car and I dumped my bike and fell to the side. Now she stopped long before hitting me, but the idea was she could have ran me over. And she waved and she parked and she's apologized, but it's okay. And I picked the bike up and I went to the pool hall. I was less than a mile from it. And, I was like, I'm getting rid of this bike, man. Cause that you can't control that, right? A rear end accident in a car, you'll get some whiplash, you'll get some pain. Rear end accident with someone at that speed on a motorcycle means you're going to hospital, critical care. And I was like, yep, getting rid of the bike. No reason to have this anymore. Especially in Florida. It's unpredictable driving out here. So
I had a client, speaking of the fear of death, I had a client that called me and she only had, actually I found out later, she only lived 2 weeks later and she was on her deathbed. And instead of like going into the place of fear, I helped coach her. What kind of life does she want to create hereafter? Where does she want to go? What country does she want to live in? What is her parents going to be like? What kind of siblings is she going to have? What kind of love is she going to create in her next life? And it really helped ease her mind, So if you're in a place where you're on the brink of death, people out there listening, go to the space of creation, and what do they say in the Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead? And I haven't read the whole thing. I just know that it talks about what your consciousness is you're taking your last breath. You want to stay in a peaceful state. You don't want to come in a place of anger, or fear, or worry, or, just in the active place of surrender. Right.
Yeah.
And just want to go to, next life is going to be in Italy. I'm going to have the best love ever,
I thought that to myself, like, can I just reincarnate to me and have some residual knowledge? So I can make some alterations. How great that's wishful thinking, but
yeah, that's great. Cause that means you love yourself. So you know what that would tell me is that you wouldn't have a lot of planets in your astrological chart in your first house, because people who have a lot of planets in your first house or the first house is that they're working on their self-love or the second, self-worth, self-esteem, finances. So you'd love yourself. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I fell in love with that idea. I've only heard this from one person. It was an off podcast interview well over a year ago. And I was kind of pulling around about reincarnation, just because, before I started the podcast, I tried to get myself a little better read and everything before starting it. And I came across this gentleman who was, he's from, I believe it was Ohio. And he said, this is the sixth time that I can recall that I'm living the exact same life, the exact same person. I'm like, really? Yeah, I die typically around 80 years old. I die in my sleep. And then I'm somewhere around 7 or 8. I remember me again. I'm like, really? Same year. Nothing, it's like it's like a long version of Groundhog Day. You ever seen that movie Groundhog Day?
Yes.
It's like,
that movie.
Yeah, it's like a lifelong version of that. He's just born back to himself again. And somewhere in his, like you said, 7 or 8 years old, he starts to remember who he is. And it becomes, it's like weirdly common to him, right? He never not marries the same woman. He never not has the same career. He just lives his life and and then he travel. And what he tells me is sometimes I travel to places I've never gone, or if I can't recall it, I'll go travel there. I'm like, wow. When I hung up with that guy, I was for like an hour thinking about that. I'm like, if I reincarnated as me over and over again, really all you get to do if you get some kind of residual memory of yourself is make small altercations, because you really, I don't think there's got to be some fundamental rule where you can't make like you can't go invest in Google because you know.
Which is why the politicians should stay away from pharma.
Right. So you can't go in there and say, well, I know that this band wrote this really good song. I'm going to write it first and put it out like a decade before them. You can't do those things. There's got to be some kind of rules, I would imagine. But what he told me, he basically lived his life again and lives it again and again and again. And I never even asked him. And now I'm thinking about it. I never asked him, like, well, aren't you tired, man? Don't you just want to rest or go to the next level? And he seems very complacent. So I don't know. That was the only time I've ever heard anyone tell me that. And easily the strangest story surrounding reincarnation I've ever encountered. Bizarre.
Well, did he talk about, the Ascension Manual program? Did he evolve? Like, did he come back and have to resolve, where you have to always evolve your soul, where you have to master the 7 deadly sins, where you have to master jealousy and anger and, all the things that plague us, right, within our own being so that we become better? Or did he talk about any of that?
No, he just legit. Just the best way to put it is that it repeated and he never had any pushback, never questioned it, never did anything differently. I asked him, like, is there like an amulet that you got in life or is there something that you felt was undone? Nothing. So that's what makes it so strange. Cause like, why is this guy, I mean, this is alleged, by the way, this is just what he's telling me, but it did, however, fuel my imagination, because a lot of the things I talk about in the show, I have no science background. This is me doing research and having a wild imagination and combining them together, right? To kind of develop a hypothesis of what it is I think is going on or what it is that I think these people are seeing. And this guy, I was at a loss. I didn't know how to approach that at all. No idea. It's the strangest thing I've ever heard. I had never heard it again. I've questioned countless people off podcasts about reincarnation and afterlife. What people hear on the show are people like you speak in length about it, form opinions, and they have a relevantly good experience. The rest of these people, their stories aren't so intricate and long. They just tell me about their experience, and it's typically like a 15-minute conversation. But this guy really made me think about that. I still think about it, in fact. I think just 2 days ago, I was laying in bed. I'm like, well, if I could start again, what would I do differently? I would definitely not hurt the feelings of the amount of girls I hurt. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So little things.
To all the girls you've loved before, right, Adam?
Yeah, love. That's the word. So, there's a lot of things I would alter that I know is within control. It's within a scope. It's not going to, in other words, if I'm born again and I'm like, 12, I'm like, I know real soon, Google's going to take off. I'm going to invest money, be a billionaire. I think there's some kind of fundamental rule of that. I would think anyway. Because if you examine Groundhog Day, the movie, he had to get it right to move on. Otherwise, he was in that loop. Oh,
yeah. That was a hard movie to watch.
It really was. So maybe that's what you know what? Maybe if the guy's listening, because I have his name written down somewhere. I just never gave him the podcast link, but maybe that's what he's doing wrong. Maybe he's something he's supposed to be doing that he's not doing, and he's going through that loop. There we go. Now I get to think about it. Maybe he's not lucky. Maybe there's something he's not doing that he's supposed to do. Yeah, there we go. I feel better now.
Or these people that, wish that they could be an artist and they end up being an engineer because their parents said so, and they incarnated into a country like most, I hear this a lot with Asian countries, India, Asian culture. They all push their kids to do what they want them to do, not what the kids want to do.
Yeah.
So they come back and they reincarnate and they have to grow a spine. They have to stand up. Maybe I don't want to marry that person. How many times have I had readings? Oh my God, it's weekly. Because I live in a population where there's a lot of Asian and Indian culture, where people come to me and they're in love with the love of their life. And oh my God, they get along so well. And the chemistry, I hear all these stories. And what do they have to do? They have to marry who their parents want them to marry. And they're not attracted. And it's, and then those poor people are in hell because they can't be present. How can you be present if your heart's somewhere else,
I
right?
agree.
I mean, you're desiring something else. That's a life of hell, if in my opinion. You can't be fully self-expressed, you can't be free, you can't be authentic. That's misery. So I think these people come in and they incarnate through these families to like stand up and like maybe spit back a little bit and that things, but no. And I always tell my clients, I said, well, you know what? You're not sleeping with your parents, are you? You know, why let them choose your path, right? Why should they choose your spouse? It's just not fair.
I agree. And that's, there's people on this planet, they're born. They could just play a guitar. They could play the piano. Some people are just remarkable artists naturally. No lessons from any of these things. And they end up being accountants. And it's mostly because forward-thinking parents are like, well, this is what you need to do. You could be a guitarist after you're done with your master's degree. Unfortunately, the idea of getting your master's degree, and you're talking a long time, you're an adult. And by that time, you met someone, you fell in love, you had kids, and the wonderful thought of being a rock star is now eliminated. Now, how do you know? By pushing this kid to go be an accountant or whatever it is to get a master's degree, and he didn't write that song that might have changed the world to save everybody. What if you stop that kid from making a painting that would bring peace to a nation, or write literature that might bring peace to a planet? You don't know. Yeah. So I agree with you. You shouldn't force children to this is what you're doing. You get married and you're going to be a lawyer. But and then meanwhile, this kid's like, but I'm really good at writing stories. Yeah, that's great. You can write stories on the side, but first you get your education. And that education speaks to 10 years of education. And then you got to do a fellowship or whatever it takes. And before you know it, time has passed by. And that passion has not only not evolved with you, but it's gone. You don't have time for it anymore. You got kids. You got bills. You got meetings. You got court. You lose that. And that's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate. And I'm sure there's a lot of cases like that out there, especially overseas where, like you said, where you're marrying this guy, but I'm 12. Yeah, too bad. You're marrying this guy. It's written by law. But I want to play the piano, Yeah, it's a shame.
There's a movie that haunts me. You talk about hauntings. There's a movie called Water that devastating for a week. I just couldn't get over it. And because it's based on true story and that, or it's true about the culture, not true story per se, but how these kids are destined to be with their husband. And what if the husband dies in India, that they're a widow at 6 years old? I mean, it just, and then pawned off to, basically serve people in it was a bad movie in a sense. It was dark because it talked about this kid going to basically being sex trafficked. Misused that way, but and how the culture over there, you can only marry one. Well, now it's changing. It has changed, as in my lifetime anyway. That where in the culture of India, where the women can't marry, but the men can. It's just there's such an inequality going on.
Well, that's literally, as you said it, why a lot of countries hate us. Not because we're America, and not because of. It's mostly because in their countries, they have really strange traditions that say things like you must be married to this guy at 12 years old and you're going to be one of his 6 wives. And these people, the youth there, maybe 20, 30 years ago, they could get away with saying this is God ordained, but we're in the internet age. And these kids over there could see what it's like here. And they're like, wait, over there, they get to choose. They want to go to school or they get to choose their friends. Wait, I don't have to marry whoever. I could just go meet someone. Like they see that, and then their drive is to get here. And to powers abroad, they're like, well, this is, they're ruining us. And they're the message they're spreading is destroying our foundations. And that's where a lot of our grief comes from between countries. It's because we have the freedom to make choice, where a lot of countries where you don't even get to really pick who. Imagine there's some countries you don't pick leadership. It's I think it's like, look how kings were. It was hereditary. Like, you're my son, you're the king. But you're not a good leader and you hate people. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm the king. So, he's at the head of the table there and he's really self-serving, doesn't really give a shit about his constituents, right? So they do horrible things. We saw that in Rome, right? In Rome, this one guy takes the people's money, builds big palaces and bathhouses and shit out of it. And that's where here we have a choice. I'm not saying they're always the great ones, unfortunately they're not really, but at least you have a choice. We take it a little too far with our anger and our angst, and we really take for granted what we have. We really do.
Oh, absolutely. We're so free here.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I challenge anybody in America that says, "Oh, this country's terrible." Well, go live in India.
true.
It's brutal, right? Go live in Iran. Forget it.
Oh,
You have no choices there. And go live in a country where they have a social system where they rank you. And if you don't rank well enough, too bad. It's crazy. So we have a lot of luxuries here. We have bullshit here, no doubt, but we could iron that out with voice. We don't have to protest and destroy shit. The power of numbers and a lot of people get together, differences could be made. Only here can you do that. Do that in another country, they'll just firebomb you. That'll be that.
yeah, that's true. So true.
Anyway, Darleen, we had a long conversation.
I know.
I enjoyed having you, and I want to have you again. So for those of you listening, we're going to say good evening, good day, good night, or whatever it is for you. And I'm going to talk to Darleen in post.
Thank you. It was great having this conversation. I
You as
appreciate
well.
it.